So I do have a bill to come before the committee, and so it's, I will move before the committee, HF653. And
Go ahead, Representative Nelson. Let's
thank
hear
you.
your bill.
And so this bill, it's in the, talking about mail C, it is putting, increasing $750,000 each year under the agreed to, for these challenge grants. And so that will be, the base funding is in the rest of the bill, but as we've heard before, this is for the FBN portion of the Mail C, and they will be funding, what we've just heard the great testimony of here before. As we see this, whether it's in farm transition, farm planning, all of that, and being able to, fund our FBN program. And the students that are in it, they do pay a portion of the tuition, but trying to make sure that this, that the tuition isn't a barrier. As you saw, there was quite a large number of them that were, really beginning farmers. Had little less experience than maybe some of us. Some people start at about 9 years old farming, but getting that experience and having this opportunity to have the someone professionally really look over and help make decisions. And it's a challenging time, hearing from across the state the challenges that farms are seeing in their finances, and having that a second set of eyes to be able to look over them, and be able to challenge them on their farm process and their economic planning, not only economic, but just the whole scope of their farm. So I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions from members of the committee? If not, moving on to your testifiers. Again, Mr. Olander, go ahead.
Thank you. Committee members, Mr. Chair, House File 653, and thank you, Mr. Representative Nelson, for carrying this bill. I would just add one, I've already testified, but one comment is this program access. Whether we talk about on the federal level, we refer to them as underserved producers. In Minnesota, we have the Emerging Farmers Office, so that's one group that we very happy to have what we call a sort, but really start to identify what are their financial and economic needs that relates to our education base, certainly in specialty crops, urban agriculture, and then we think of our traditional farmers as well. And so the idea behind these grants for the college support is to continue to mitigate the tuition there so that we don't have an access problem as we go forward. Certainly as we think of the down times of agriculture, that's when our program is needed the most, but unfortunately it's one of those things that the farmers have a tuition piece that they've got to chip in on that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Olander. Next up, we have Hannah Barnhart. Step up to the table, identify yourself, and proceed with your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Hannah Bernhardt, and I run a diversified direct market livestock operation in Finlayson, not too far from Representative Nelson. I also serve as the Pine County Farmers Union president. And from my own experience and on behalf of the Minnesota Farmers Union, I'm honored to share my strong support for additional funding for farm business management. When I started my farm, I knew how to rotationally graze and to care for livestock, and I also felt confident at marketing because of some previous job experience. But I'd never even looked at QuickBooks, let alone applied for a business loan. I was in my third year of farming, hobbling together my records in notebooks and spreadsheets when I first worked with farm business management. I had no idea what to expect, and as a beginner, I know I would not have understood the value or felt I could afford farm business management had I not been given a scholarship through the Land Stewardship Project's Journey Person program. But at the end of my very first meeting with a farm financial advisor at my farm, I felt a huge sense of relief about my finances and the decisions I was making. We hadn't solved every pressing question, but just having an expert to talk to who had seen all kinds of complicated financial situations and was unfazed by my operation made me feel really secure that we would figure it all out. In the years since then, I can't imagine not having an FBM instructor to help me evaluate my financial standing and also stay creative in exploring other sources of revenue. So for instance, he's helped me make the hard decision to move away from my least profitable enterprise. He's encouraged me to expand on my strengths in agritourism. And last year, he helped walk me through the overwhelming process of hiring my first employees. I also know farm business management to be adaptable and responsive to the needs of all farmers. So several years ago, my instructor invited me to speak to the annual FBM staff meeting about the unique needs of direct market and diversified operations. And FBM immediately responded by working to hire new emerging farmer instructors and use grant money to start an intro to farm business management program for other direct market farmers. So in closing, I can't express enough the benefit of this program for beginning and experienced farmers alike. And I strongly support funding to expand the hiring of instructors with experience in specialty crops, land transition, and mental health. Farming is inherently stressful because there's so much you can't control. And I've actually asked my instructor if he ever feels more like a therapist having to listen to all of farmers' money's anxieties. So I really appreciate Representative Nelson's focus on rural mental health and know that it will allow farm business management to continue to serve farmers well. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Barnhart, thank you very much. Questions from members? Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe this is a Mr. Savory question on just how much is this additional spending over the base?
Mr. Savory?
Chair and members, the bill itself, HF653, includes the entire appropriation for the AGREET program. This specific clause that Representative Nelson is talking about is on line 2.9. It's clause 3. The base for the appropriation for MALC-S's current law is $2,250,000. This would increase that by $750,000 each fiscal year, so biannually an increase of $1.5 million.
Representative Hanson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm assuming we're laying this bill over, waiting for a forecast and looking for the future. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair Hanson. Yes.
And then just finally, Mr. Chair, so, with the disruptions that are occurring in agriculture, we may need to revisit things that we've been doing over and over, year after year, to look at what are the immediate needs dealing with the crisis that's at hand.
Any further questions? Representative Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is on the bill itself. So if there's is this where I should ask this question? This is my first time in a bill hearing under your leadership. So I'll ask this question. Just a couple clarifying questions, and this is getting laid over. So these may be questions that we can deal with offline or as we get closer to a budget bill. But I noticed under the Forever Green Initiative funding, in lines 219 through 224, it requires a report to the chairs and ranking minority members of the legislative committees about this particular program. And that's a unique thing added on. None of these other areas of funding, including ones that are much larger, including the 33% increase. So I'm just kind of wondering why that particular program and maybe not others have that requirement around it, or some sort of reporting mechanism back to the committee.
Representative Nelson? I can comment if you...
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and comment.
Well, that's not the focus that we're looking at today on this bill. We're looking in on the funding for the programs we talked about today. And again, this is a starting figure, and the language is all new language in the bill, as you see. So it's subject to change and modification. So Representative Nelson, any further comment?
No, but there are, periodic reports that are come back to the chair, throughout the year, and this is just one of them. So,
Any further question, Representative Smith?
Yeah, that's fine. I just thought it would. I just noticed that not in the other areas of funding. This secondary question I had is more specifically on the Farm Business Management Challenge grants, which are wonderful. Thank you for your work. My specific question is in farm transition planning, obviously incredibly important. My question, maybe some background on this, is when we hear figures about like the average size of family farms, there's a large difference between what data tells us is the average family farm, which is 388 acres in Minnesota, and then what the median size of a farm is, which is 130. Which tells me the difference between those two figures is there's a couple of very, very large farms that are skewing those numbers. And I would be, maybe I'll just put this in the form of a question. Does this program provide some sort of guardrails where funding here isn't going to those larger farms rather than small family farms that are struggling with those actual planning for the next generations? Does that question make sense?
Representative Nelson or Mr. Olander?
Yeah, I'll start with the answer. One of the, and I don't know what the definition from in Minnesota, but I think federally the definition of a farmer, if you have more than $1,000 worth of crops or produce sales in a year, you're a farmer. So that, that can be pretty small. It doesn't take, it's about 2 dozen eggs right now, and you've reached that. But so it doesn't take a whole lot to reach that. So, a small, a farmer, it's probably more accurately would be described as dollar sales than, acres. But I think I'll turn it over to Mr. Olander.
Okay.
Mr. Olander?
Sure. Appreciate that question, Representative Smith. So just so we're clear, there's no funds that go directly to the farms out of these pieces. This is all part of the program. Because we are a public program, those that wish to enroll and pay the tuition necessary to engage at the level that they want. And I say that because they do have different rates or different, the more tuition they buy, the more they can get out of the program, right? So we do not have the ability to deny anyone access to that. You are certainly correct when it comes to a larger farm might have several owners that take risk within that operation and then become multiple students in the program. We have those scenarios. As opposed to a 130-acre farm, as you quoted, might just have a situation where it is just a single owner, a couple, whatever the case is that you're working with in that regard. So we do vary that the best we can to be able to do that, but we do not have the ability to deny access of our program to them because we offer it through a public education system.
Representative Smith?
That was great. Thank you for that testimony.
I might add that the farmers actually pay tuition to be in the program as well. One more testifier, but one quick question, Ms. Barnhart. You said you had livestock. Any frozen water this morning or anything?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I had to go out this morning, unchip and open the water for all the cattle.
Yeah, this weather is really a challenge for those that have livestock, so good luck and keep it going, and
Thanks.
good luck to all the farmers. One last testifier, again, Mr. Peterson, on this bill, if you want to step up to the testifier table, identify yourself again and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, Hunter Peterson with Minnesota Farm Bureau, here in support of House File 653. I guess I would just say that the Farm Business Management Program really does improve farmers' business management skills, and it really does save family farms. About 2 weeks ago, I was talking with one of our members who is an FBM instructor, and she told me right now she's working with about 50 farms, and of those 50, she could right now make 5 of them cash flow, which I think just shows how difficult times are for farmers and agricultural markets. But moreover, I bring this up because, FBM instructors, they do incredible work, but they are human like the rest of us. And so, they take on that emotional toll and the stress of the farms they're working with, kind of as Ms. Bernhardt alluded to, with her FBM instructors perhaps sometimes feeling like a therapist. And so, continued funding, increased funding for this program will help ensure that, these instructors have a reasonable workload. It's going to be key to help managing their stress on the job and preventing burnout ultimately. So stability and longevity for these faculty members will keep the FBM program strong and preserve more family farms in Minnesota. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to voice support for the bill. And thank you.
Question from Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe to the bill author or Mr. Olander. So since I'm new at this, just looking at the language, the lines from 2.11 to 2.13 and awarding the grants, MALC shall prioritize funding for faculty with expertise in farm transition planning, rural mental health, and growing specialty crops in urban areas. Can you give me a breakdown of all the previous fundings? How have you granted out how has this been granted out? How has it been divided? Has it been, through the 3 areas here? Has it been, 33, 33, 33, or how has that been divvied up? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Olander.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lee, thank you for that question. So if I go back to, perhaps in my earlier slides, you can look in there, it comes back down to the family goals and what they're going after. What does this farm family want for the next year and for the next 10 years? Is it farm transition? Then I would say we allocate 100% of those dollars as it relates to their education to that effort. Is it under urban agriculture where they want to grow a diversified business? Is it under crop production? Does that help you? When it's granted out on a per faculty basis. And then our job as center leaders is to make sure those faculty are professionally developed to handle multiple subjects. And then in some cases, like i.e. robotic dairies, we have specific faculty that are really professionally developed in those areas, are specialized. So the idea is, what is the student's goal? And then that will drive what the subject matter is in education on the farm. Thus, then, the challenge grant will focus in that area. We don't want to be directing the farm family. We want them to tell us where are your areas of goals, and that will tell us what are the outcomes in terms of business management that they need to achieve.
Thank you. Follow-up? Quickly, because we are getting a little bit behind schedule, so go ahead, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe, just a comment then before, so we can move on. You're going back to Representative Smith, questions about reporting. I think it'll be good to get a report on the previous funding and how that has been, depending on the farmers, but it'll be good to know of all the funding that we have gone out, how many of that has gone to farmers showing interest in, specialty crop in urban areas and the other areas too. And I think that will tie into, one of the future presentation that we're going to hear here around rural mental health. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll note that. Thank you very much, Representative.